So I ended up, one thing I learned from the police that was there is that they always had part time gigs. Always, 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 always. And having a gun and a badge, you could get cash gigs, you can get gigs doing anything and everything because you're the police. I even had my own side gigs, but I started a balloon business, a balloon decorating business. And so once they kicked me out, I still was taking care of my granddad and rent had to be paid. So I ended up on Roosevelt and Pulaski with my gun in my pocket, selling balloons on the corner to keep us going. And I'm fighting this case. It took us 7 years to get to trial. And by this time, there was an internal affairs investigation. And in the IAD investigation, while I was still in the office, there was a male white. His name was Seabach. Seabach was fair. And Seabach calls me one day in the Meg office and he says, Yorley, this is Seabach. He says, I want you to be careful. I just got your case. I'm going to investigate it and I'm going to get these motherfuckers. And I said, okay, and hung up the phone. 2 weeks after that call, Seabach got transferred out and two more male whites got transferred in. And after they went through all of the IAD testimony, which is taped testimony, everybody had told on everybody else. So they knew that what I was saying was true, that it was legitimate. So they called me in to the IAD office and they say, Yorley, we got them on tape. They confessed to everything. And I started to cry. And the secretary is trying to console me. And so they say, the chief wants to know what you want. So I get myself together and I said, you tell the chief that I'm like a rabid dog. I asked you repeatedly just to leave me alone and let me do my job. And you didn't do that. So you tell the chief that I'm like a rabid dog. And when you corner a rabid dog, he bites until he gets that ass. You pissed on me and told me that it was raining outside. You left me on the roof with no umbrella, no coverage, nothing. And you ignored all of the things that I had to endure and go through. And now, you want to know what I want? I want to get that ass. I'm going to bite until I get that ass. That's what you tell the chief. So they both turned red and they were pissed off. And then I left. So I have them on tape. I have the original tapes from IAD of them all confessing. We get to trial. It's a 22-day trial. They come in, all of the officers involved, because now my teammates have changed. There were other officers that were involved. I sued the sheriff in his personal and official capacity. I sued Fred Guerra in his personal and official capacity. I sued Frank Guerra and the Illinois State Police. I sued everybody and their mother in their personal and official capacity. Everybody was aware. They all played a part to it and they all were a part of it. So there were numerous officer testimonies and they got on the stand saying, yeah, we called her niggas. So what? We call them all niggas. See them niggas over there on the corner? That's who we gonna bust. What's wrong? Like, they were like, what's wrong with that? What's the big deal? We call them all niggas. My supervisor, my Hispanic supervisors got on the stand. They're brothers. And they said when they were little, they used to play tic-tac-toe, catch a nigga by his toe. So they didn't see anything wrong with it. They used to call me a nigga so much, they call me miates. Miates means nigger in Spanish. So what's the big deal? We call all niggas niggas. She didn't understand. We're right. That nigga is wrong. Even with all of their confessions, and they told on each other. Um, every day they would sit up on break and talk about how they were going to make me cry on the stand. They would, in the cloakroom, the community cloakroom, you go in, it's winter time, so everybody hangs their coat up so the courtroom is not all cluttered and crowded. They would throw my things and stomp them, empty a little tote bag or whatever I had. They would take it off and stomp it. The chief that signed my transfer resigned. So the new chief would come to court in uniform to intimidate the jury. There were 3 sets of attorneys, and every defendant had their own set of attorneys, including the sheriff. He was benefited from the taxpayers because he had a state's attorney representing him. The judge at the time was friends with Judge Pencham, infamous Judge Pencham, and Judge Gottschall was the federal judge. They knew each other personally. And in fact, they had just been on a retreat together where they shared a room. That's how good friends they were. And Judge Gottschall made it a point to try to stay neutral. But racism was so strong in this courtroom. There was an incident where the judge had dismissed the jury, and the white female and male attorneys were yelling at the judge, but the judge had her head down, and they were going back and forth. Judge this and judge that, and yeah, judge this and judge that. She raises her head and says, Andre, which was my attorney, who is male black, stop yelling at me. And he says to her, Your Honor, I haven't said a word. And in that moment, she herself realizes the racial games that have been played, and it gets quiet. And everybody's looking at the judge. And she tells the bailiff, bring the jurors in. So then the silence breaks, the stares break, and the attorneys are shuffling papers on each of their desks. And we look up, and Judge Gottschall is crying as the jury comes in. And she's crying so hard that you can see her body gyrating from how hard she is crying. And the jurors are coming in to be seated. At that point, she realized that how she was being used in this racist game. We get to the jury. During jury selection, they came in with all white jurors. And Judge Pencham vehemently objected. And he said, we're going to shut it down, damn it, until you get some damn black jurors in here. Nobody is to get let off. Nobody is to get excused. This is unacceptable. This is not a jury that we will accept. And of course, there's strikes given where other attorneys can strike a selection that we would pick, and we had strikes that would go against a selection that they had picked. But with 3 sets of attorneys, the attorney for the sheriff and the attorney for the defendants, they got together. They have strikes individually, and we only had 1 set of strikes. So we ended up with 12 jurors. 11 were men and women white men and women, and there was one black guy on my jury. So we're going through trial, and they set my house on fire. I'm leaving court. It's a rainy day. It's late in the day. I go get my son. We go home, and it's misty where I live. And I'm driving across the crosswalk, and I can see my neighbor take off running towards my car, but I'm driving to go get in the garage. And she's flailing her arms and she's waving, and she comes around to the back. She's like, Yorley, Yorley, Yorley. I'm trying to catch you. You just not getting home. I said, yes. She said, your house was on fire when I got home. Um, well, I go inside and she comes to the front door. She didn't come to the garage. So I open the door. She's ringing the doorbell and knocking on the door. And she's like, I came home and your house was on fire. I called the fire department and they put it out. She said, see, in my front, right, just out my front door, in the first step on before you get to the porch, there's a hole in the step. And she said, had I not called the police, had I not gotten home, the whole house would have burned down. She said, your house was on fire. I saw two kids running down the courtyard and they jumped the fence. And I said, okay. She said, the fire marshal will be calling you. The chief fire marshal will be calling you. So I go back in. I'm getting my son together. And I get a call. And it's the chief fire marshal. And he says, Miss Huff, I was at your home today. There's been a fire. Somebody said a bag of feces, lit a bag of feces on your front porch. And had your neighbor not noticed it, it would have caused much more damage. It probably would have burned down the whole house. And I said, yeah, Chief, I'm just getting home from court. He said, this was a accident of some kind. So I said, no, I would not categorize it as that, Chief. I'm involved in a major racial discrimination lawsuit against the sheriff of Cook County, and I just got back from court today. We're in court, and they're sending a message. This was done intentionally. And he's quiet, and then he says, "Oh, really?" He says, "So we're gonna make sure we look into it and get as much as we can, but you be careful." And I said, okay. So I get to court the next morning and I tell Tiffany Ferguson, we want to put it on the record. And we get before the judge, before the jury comes in. She asks that they wait before they bring the jury in. We want to put something on the record. And we tell the judge, Your Honor, last night when Miss Huff got home, her house was set on fire. And it is suspicious activity, is not an accident. So the whole courtroom is quiet. And Judge Gacho is looking at me with a stare that she is in shock. So then Tiffany breaks the silence and says, okay, Your Honor, we're ready to proceed with court. And we just move right along. 22 days. And the jury goes back to deliberate. And they take a couple of hours. So we get back in the courtroom. We're ready for the jury to give their decision. And the bailiff comes out of the back and he has the decision facing outward. It's not covered. They're supposed to have it covered. And I see what it says. And I'm talking to God. And I'm saying, what the hell do you mean? What are you doing? What the hell is going on? And this is just a personal conversation that I'm having. So I don't move. And he gives the paperwork to the judge. Judge Gottschall reads, the verdict is not guilty. Judge Pencham and Andre Grant jump up, grab their briefcases, and loudly announce that racism is alive and well, and they leave. And Tiffany and I are left in the courtroom. The courtroom clears. There's a moment of silence because the defendant's attorneys cannot believe that they got a not guilty verdict. They're in shock. So after they have their mouth open, they look at each other and then they start to celebrate. Tiffany wants to go back and talk to the jury to see where their heads were, what's going on. So I'm waiting because I want her to talk to them too. And I'm just sitting there and I'm talking to God like, what the hell is going on? What do you mean, not guilty? I said, you know, I'm not giving up, right? This isn't over. I don't give a fuck what they say. It's not over. And I'm just going on and on and on. I'm going at it. And I'm just sitting there. So Tiffany goes back and talks to the jury. She comes out. She grabs her briefcase. We go out in the hall. And we just fall over each other crying. She was just like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it, Yorley. She said, I talked to the jurors. All of the white jurors said that this was wrong. These were bad guys. This was a bad situation. They wanted to give you as much money as they could. But the black guy said to her, I don't know what the issue is. They just called her a nigger. She'll get over it. And he was against it. So I take a breath and I shake myself. And I say to Tiffany, Tiffany, I need an attorney. By 5 o'clock tomorrow that specializes in appeals, discrimination appeals. Not 501, not 515, not 530. So she backs up and looks at me. And so she's like straightening out her clothes. She's just like, oh, well, I said, this is not over. I need you to call me tomorrow as soon as you can. Find me an attorney. And I walk away and I can hear her sniffling. She's getting herself together and she's like, okay. So the next morning, maybe 10 or 11, I get a call from Tiffany. She's like, you're not going to believe this. I said, okay. She says, I called a colleague of mine, Jeff Cummings, and he works at Barack Obama's old firm, and they specialize in discrimination lawsuits. But you're not going to believe this. I said, what? She says, when I called him, I haven't talked to him since college, but when I called him and told him about your case, he said, I've been following the case, Tiffany. Have her call me. She has a good ground for appeal. I've already been following the case. Now, as I've told you this story, I hope that you were able to pick up on the significance of the actions that have occurred. Because there is no chance on this earth that Tiffany would call an old college colleague and he would say to her that he's already been following the case, that he already knows the grounds for the appeal. But it doesn't just stop there. So she says, he has a billing office, so you'll be able to work out a payment plan. And so